Firefighters of Reddit. What was your worst that's totally arson moment when you got a call? Story 1. Okay, I've posted this before, but it's so perfect here why I now look forward to being called to jury duty. Condensed, because this took more than 12 days. It was 30 years ago, and I still hope to see it's like again. I'm on jury duty, we have to sit. Charge is arson. Supposedly a farmer burned down his barn for insurance money. Prosecutor outlines the case. The farmer moved most of the stuff out of the barn into a second barn over a period of a week. A neighbor in a subdivision that backed up to the farm noticed the unusual activity. Said neighbor being outdoors a lot building a deck on his vacation. Next, the neighbor saw the farmer walking slowly around the outside of the barn, pouring something from a blue gasket on the lower part of the barn walls. Farmer goes out of sight to the front of the barn, and flames erupt all along the base of the barn. Neighbor calls 911. But by the time fire department arrives 5 minutes or so later, the barn is fully involved, and they just act to contain, which is essentially just standing by as they note the nearby ground has been closely mowed, possibly to prevent spread. They note the smell of diesel fuel. Police collect the farmer and take him to station. Fire investigator says definitely arson. Insurance company says the barn was insured. Defendant's lawyer says essentially nothing. Prosecutor calls witnesses. Neighbor confirms that's what he saw. Firemen say flames spread with a rapidity that was out of place even in a wooden barn, and they smelled petroleum. Investigator says there were clear marks on the ground where accelerant burned, and it still smelled of fuel after the fire died down. Police fire investigators said there was virtually nothing in the burned barn, ruined tools or equipment, but that there was a good supply of items in the other barn that appeared to have been recently placed, including some that was sitting on grass that was still green underneath the box. No cross-examination. Defense calls the farmer, and first question asked is, let's cut to the chase. Did you burn your barn down? Yep. Why did you do it? It was old and rotten with termites. Gonna fall down, not safe. HM, have you always burned down old farm buildings? Yep. And my daddy did before me. It's a farm. Are you aware that you need a permit to burn debris in this county? Been doing it that way on this farm since we had dangerous engines. Never had no permit. The fine is up to 50. Oh, wait, I forgot you're zone active agriculture and are exempt, so no permit needed. But why didn't you tell any of this to the police? They didn't ask till after they put handcuffs on me and took me to the police station. They told me anything I said would be used against me and said I had the right to remain silent. And then some lawyer guy came in and told me I was going to prison for insurance fraud. I remember Perry Mason said, don't talk to anyone but your lawyer. So I didn't. Did you file an insurance claim? What for? The barn wasn't worth anything in that state. And I moved all the stuff out. I suggested we try to talk them out of this. You said you wanted your day in court. What's up with that? They came on my land, arrested me without telling me what for. Told me later it was for arson and insurance fraud, and put that in the papers. All my friends, relatives, and neighbors know about this. They made me look dishonest. I want to make sure everyone knows the real facts. I figure this is better than them just dropping it, and everyone wondering whether they just decided not to send an old man to prison. Defense rests. Story 2. This thread was made for me. My very first scene, the owners were acting super shady from the very beginning. They claimed that all of the clothes in their house, their pictures, and their TV had been stolen by the crackhead neighbors after the fire. In a terrible attempt to cover up the fact they'd moved all of their out before setting the house on fire. But the real kicker was the fireproof safe sitting open in the middle of the bedroom floor and the gas can sitting open in the master bedroom closet. Their alibi was buying a canoe approximately 2 hours away at 3 a.m. The next was the guy who stood no further than 2 feet from me at all times and turned increasingly white as I found more areas of fire damage that were completely separate from the rest of the fires, had gotten drunk and set the house on fire in 5 separate areas. Then there was the guy who set his house on fire in 3 different areas. They were on 3 separate floors. Super nice guy. We were sitting and chatting. I started to take samples of all 3 areas, and he looked at me and said, man, you've been super cool to me. I set this place on fire. I'm sorry. Then there was the lady who had a legitimate fire on the first floor a few weeks before. She used the insurance money to pay her cousin to do the repairs to the house. Predictably, he used that money to buy weed and vodka. So she decided to have herself another fire in the basement this time. 2 fires in the space of a few months. Red flag number 1. She got 16 bottles of acetone, 1,000 cotton, some latex gloves, and a torch. When I first got there, I went down in the basement and found the first area of major burning on top of a bench seat that had absolutely nothing on top of it. Red flag number 2. Unfortunately, the basement was full of about 15 inches of water, so I spent the next hour draining the basement. When it drained, I was able to open a cabinet that was full of burnt newspapers. Red flag number 3. I then found all 16 bottles of acetone with the caps off. Red flag number 4. I then opened an upper cabinet and found 600 of those cottons spread out throughout the cabinet, and the smell of acetone nearly dropped me on the spot. Red flag number 5. I then opened the other cabinet right next to that and found a singed cotton ball sitting in a Coke bottle cap with a weird blue plastic around it. Turns out she had tried to do the old arson trick where you fill a latex glove full of gasoline and put it over a candle. Eventually the gas will eat through the latex and boom, you have a good fire going. Well, she filled it with acetone, which does not eat through latex and only melted when the upper layer of smoke became too hot and melted the latex, which put out the cotton ball. Red flag number 6. I then found another latex glove tied off full of acetone. Red flag number 7. And then I talked to her. She was burned in the fire. The fire department found her in the backyard naked and screaming about a dragon. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to light acetone, but it doesn't burn like gasoline. It flashes, and if it flashes close enough to you, it will light you on fire, which it did. She told me the fire attacked her. Turns out she tried to light those 16 bottles of acetone, and it flashed up and set her on fire. And that is red flag number 8. I'm sure there are others I'm forgetting. I had an apartment where the ex-boyfriend kicked in the back door and set the apartment on fire and spray painted F you bitch on the door. Edito, I forgot about the guy who swore up and down he had no idea how the fire started. Then told me when I was starting to dig through the bedroom that I would probably find a melted gas can because he knocked it over when he sneezed and the cigarette flew out of his mouth and ignited the gas, which you might notice is not possible. Story 3. Firefighter in a small casino town in Nevada. Got a call for a fire on the 3rd floor of a casino hotel. This casino failed inspections every year. Someone had checked in under a false name, dumped a can of gasoline on the bed, and started a fire. Luckily, the sprinkler system took care of most of it. A good portion of the 3rd floor hallway was flooded, but none of the safety doors closed, no audible alarms went off, and lights only went off in the room where the fire started. None of the people staying in the rooms on either side had any idea what had happened. One was quite surprised to find us in full gear when he left his room to go gamble. There were no personal affects in the room. We never found out why this guy torched the bed, and to my knowledge, he was never identified or located after the incident. Story 4. When I was in firefighter training for AmeriCorps, the first story we heard was about a guy that lit 15 acres of woodland on fire, just because when they finally found the dude who started the fire, he was jerking off right by the flames. Edit forgot to add this guy was responsible for numerous fires in the area. Story 5. A trailer that a dead body had been found and earlier accidentally caught fire when the investigation stopped for the night, so the officers could rest. Another one. The owner was a notorious drug dealer, and her house was up in flames. She never made anything inside of the house, but she did stash drugs there. Story 6 was my first shift as a new lieutenant with a platoon of 10. Crackhead and his sister light up 4 houses, a 10-plex, a church, and 2 garages all in a span of 30 minutes. 80 drug debt caused $8 million in damages. They confessed to the cops in the morning. Story 7. Not a firefighter, but where I grew up, there was a beautiful old fire station. Sometime during the Victorian era, they had converted an old stone church into a fire station, and so it was a protected historic building. The thing is that when it was converted, horse-drawn fire trucks were all that was available, and the area just had a couple of villages, so that was good enough. The fire brigade couldn't put a full-size truck in the building, and for some reason couldn't sell the land and build another station somewhere else. Oh, and the area had been swallowed up by London, so it was way too big an area for one half-size truck. Mysteriously, one day, whilst the truck was on a call-out, the building caught fire. They couldn't spare any trucks from neighboring areas in time, and the local truck couldn't get back. By the time a fire was put out, the single-story stone building was declared a complete loss and would have to be torn down. It was ruled an accidental fire. Somehow, the firefighters had accidentally filled the building with enough flammable material that it was able to damage thick, solid stone walls. And that material accidentally caught fire at the worst possible time, as the sprinkler system was accidentally out of order that day. Story 8. A few years ago was called to a structure fire. First truck on scene. Heavy smoke visible. I walk up to the house, and a guy comes around for the back of the house smoking a cigarette. Tells us he doesn't want his house saved. Mask up to make entry, and out of the blue the guy ran up behind me and tried to stab me with a dull steak knife. Turns out he was on meth, and his girlfriend had overdosed on heroin in the house. So he torched the place and didn't want us to put the fire out. Thank God for my thick bunker coat. Didn't feel a thing and didn't penetrate the coat, duh. Skinny meth head got form tackled by my entire truck company. Was one of my more interesting calls for sure. Story 9. In rural firefighting. We rely on what is known as mutual aid. If one department has a fire, other nearby departments lend a hand. Pretty simple and very standard for our corridor. Usually when there has a structure fire, 5 total departments will show up. Now, at the most rural edge of our corridor is an all-volunteer department. There are good people and firefighters with good hearts. But with a limited budget from a small tax base with little corporate income sources comes limited proficiency. Also, this is a fully volunteer department, and we'll call them VD. Most days the station is not staffed, and many volunteers need to drive in from their houses to the station before gearing up and being ready to roll. Oftentimes, when they are called to a fire, there's often a few minutes delay before they respond to the page, and then roughly 5 to 10 minute delay at best before they can roll out an engine or tender. Keep in mind, this is during the day. Now, that is out of the way. Let's get to the fire. The page comes over the station speakers, waking us from sleep at 2:30 in the morning. Volunteer department name here, standby, for fire tones, followed by their specific department chime. Now everyone is sitting up in bed. If the fire tone is real, we need to get rolling too, because as I mentioned, everyone on duty in the corridor rolls to the fire. Dispatch strikes back up, confirmed structure fire in the middle of the volunteer department's town. Everyone jumps out of bed, runs to the bay, bunks up, and hops in the engine within about 60 to 90 seconds from the tone. We are all excited, lights are on, and we begin tearing down the highway in the old girl. Now, this is where things begin to get weird. As we are pulling out of the station, the VD's chief gets on the radio. He is already in his car and on scene, within 100 seconds of the tone going out, odd for that department. But given that this was in the middle of a small town, maybe we can write it off. He gives a picture of the scene. One house appears to have smoke coming out of one side. Given how small these houses are, this means roughly 14 of the house is exposed to fire. At this time, all the other departments are chiming in on a radio, informing dispatch of their truck and status en route. Things now begin to take another odd turn. We have 5 additional trucks coming in addition to VD's trucks. However, VD's chief begins to turn them away. Again, not necessarily common, but not unheard of if the fire is under control. What is odd here is that VD's trucks aren't on scene yet. The fire is progressing, and he turns away every truck except my engine, which is coming from the furthest station away. One of the closer fire departments, let's call them OD, pikes up on the radio, essentially stating, VD, we stated we're coming in our brush engine, not our brush truck. Are you sure? VD chief responded with, I'm sure you can stand down. Other department OD responded with, negative, we're 5 minutes out, we will be on scene. I had a quick giggle in the engine. They essentially told VD to off with that noise. We're going to be there to fight a fire. So this is who is responding at this point, VD with their engine and tender 3 to 4 people. Other department with their brush engine and medic 4 people, and us. Luckily for us, we had an overstaffed engine with every single seat filled. So we were bringing 5 people on one engine. Normally it'd be running 2. By the time we arrive on scene, the house is a total loss. We put out the remaining flames and hot spots. And my LT takes over the scene from the VD chief after speaking with our assistant chief again. Uncommon, VD and their chief go home around 4 in the morning, leaving us and OD on scene. As we're doing overhaul, and my LT pulls me aside and asks me a question. Hey, I want to ask, how do you think this fire started? I shrugged. It was too early to tell, but given the time of year, I suggested it could have started with a furnace. Well, let me tell you this, there is no gas or electricity connected to this house. And do you know whose house this is? It's one VD chief's vacant properties, which was due to be torn down for a rebuild in a month. So this is where things clicked, why the VD chief was on scene so fast, why he turned away the apparatuses he did, and why we assumed control of the scene and sent VD and their chief home. Pretty much everyone on the corridor suspects the VD chief burned his own house and worked the scene to make sure it was a total loss. We don't think the rest of the department was in on it. Currently, this is still under investigation, and I doubt much will come of it given the burden of proof needed, but the state is involved, and they really don't around with arson here. There are more oddities to this than I let on, but this is a long enough story. Story 10, not myself. But my cousin said they got a guy who had bought a piece of land that had an old house on it, and he had decided to tear down the house. But after finding out how much it would cost to bring in someone to demolish and remove what was left, he decided the easiest way to get rid of the house was to set fire to it. So the guy asked the fire department if he can do that, and they tell him no, because it's dangerous and arson. A couple days after this conversation, they get a call from a nearby address about a house on fire, and figure out that guy went ahead and set the house on fire. They had to show up and put it out, and the police got involved. Turns out later the guy also tried to commit fraud by claiming the house caught fire and tried to collect the money. Story 11, firefighter in New England. We had a fire at a house that was undergoing renovations. Earlier that day, EMS had transported the elderly father to the hospital after a fall. We get there that afternoon, and the house is ripping. Ends up being a total lose. Fast forward 7 months, and the son who lived with the father had transformed the former chicken coop on the property into a living space where he was now living. Now, in the middle of the night, this building also catches fire. The son was still on scene when we got there, told the officer where the fire was, and then promptly got in his car and left the scene to go visit his elderly father, who was apparently staying at a nearby hotel at 3 in the morning. Our fire marshals have determined they were both accidental fires, but there are too many fishy statements going around. And now the guy has an RV on the same property and is rebuilding both the house and chicken coop. Story 12, when I fought wildland fires, I lived near a place that had the highest arson rate per capita in the U.S. Every fire I responded to in that area was arson. 22-year-old rookie me thought it was crazy, but it turns out everyone was pretty accustomed to it. Story 13, I was on jury duty for this one. A guy publicly says that if his girlfriend leaves him, he's going to burn their house down. The guy gets into a fight with his girlfriend at a party. She says she's going to leave him. He says if she leaves him, he'll burn down their house. She leaves as the middle of the afternoon party ends. 90 seconds later, the house is burning furiously. The guy is missing. Fire department concludes that the fire was set. Police start looking for the guy. Some nights the guy shows up at his friend's house for beer and admits that he started the fire. Police keep looking for him. Guy goes to his girlfriend's place and tells her he did it. The guy gets arrested, pleads not guilty. The story I tell here gets told in court. Witnesses telling their part in the story. I did learn a lot about how fires burn as taught to us by the experts. All the defense had was that the RCMP left evidence in their car in sealed cans when they stopped for lunch, and in theory could have been tampered with. We, the jury, stepped out. Took about 2 minutes to conclude he was guilty. Then we ordered for coffee and donuts to kill time. So it looked like we deliberated for a while. Story 14, I'm not a firefighter, but in middle school my family became victims of a serial arsonist in my hometown. I wake up one night to my mom yelling for us to get out of the house. Our really odd neighbors, recluses who did everything at night, were grilling at 3 in the morning and saw that our trash cans were engulfed in flames. Investigators show up the next day. Garage is toast, fire starter material and what's left of the cans, F-150 nearly blew up. The whole package, come to find out, a ton of fires have been happening in the same manner as ours, full trash cans up against the garage in the middle of the night. There were no leads, so not much you could do. Fast forward 2 weeks, and my family is still in a hotel because repairs are underway. We get a call one morning saying they caught the guy. Apparently he had a knack for cross-dressing because he was in a woman's dress hiding in a bush a block away from a freshly started fire. Only reason they got him was because they beefed up by cop patrols throughout the night. No motive, just had a fetish for flame, I guess. He still lives around the corner from me. Came back after he did time. Pretty wild. Story 15, I'm not a firefighter, but the story fits. So here goes. My friend's childhood house burned down when he was 15. He had just gotten in from watching Grandma's Boy at his sister's house and came home to his mom's shit house drunk at the kitchen counter with a bottle of wine. His dad was on the hammock out back, passed out after he snuck away from the crazy drunk to smoke a joint in peace. He's not even in the house a minute and can tell there's something wrong. He said the wall was glowing like somehow the flames from the fireplace had gotten into the wall and spread, and the house was smokier than it should have been. He gets more into the house and asks his mom why it's so smoky and if she saw the wall, and she pours herself another drink while sitting at the counter like he wasn't there. He freaks out because while the house is on fire, his mom's shit house drunk, and he's 15, so he runs out to try and wake his dad up. He gets him up, and they run into the house to try and figure out, but it's filling with smoke, and you can tell it's about to be a nightmare. His dad tells him to stay outside and brings the mom out there before going in for the dogs before the fire fully took over. Firemen come, put it out eventually. Said it looked to have started in the wall between the fireplace and his room because his bed, which was up against that wall, was toasted at the top, and so was that wall. When they can finally get back in the house, he notices a bunch of his mom had just bought him at the mall like clothes he left in his room for school the next day weren't there, even though the chair they were on wasn't burned. His jewelry box that was usually on his nightstand where he kept some family chains and rings and stuff wasn't there. His dad found his wedding album and a few other things in the washer and dryer completely safe from smoke or fire damage. The mom totally burned the house down for the insurance money. She was content to just sit there and get wasted while her husband's childhood home that he grew up in and wanted to raise his children in went up in flames. Story 16, house fully involved in the middle of the night. Neighbors stated that the home's residents were renters who had been evicted earlier that day for non-payment. Not hard to put 2 and 2 together. Story 17, not a firefighter, but I live in a large city in the UK. It's in the top 5, and we have, as all English cities have, large old building that can't really be used for much, but look nice and give the city historical value. A total for 6 of these buildings have burned down in the past few years. The fires always started in the middle of the night, declared random arson by police, and usually a few months after they were in the paper because the city planned to demolish retrofit them and permission was denied. It is very clear that the city burns down listed building and builds what they want on the site. The city was also found to be putting, in their own words, blacks, druggies, and other undesirables into certain areas to keep them contained, I guess. This city is a hole. Story 18, long story short. But hey, erase the good parts. I responded to a house filled with smoke. We arrived and found a large, irregular burn pattern on the carpet in the living room with an odd small pile of stuff in the middle of it. Owners were outside crying. Cops were there. Lots going on. House was filled with thick but lingering smoke. No detectors going off. Quick check and found no fire, so we evacuated the smoke, figured all the batteries were dead, and it was a very close call. That's what my report said. Kind of find out this 14-year-old girl who lived there had attempted to murder her family. She had gotten up in the middle of the night and taken the batteries out of all the smoke detectors and then poured lighter fluid on the floor in the living room and lit that off. She put a few personal items on the floor to help the fire go and then left, locking the front door behind her. She waited outside, and after a half hour, when nothing was happening, she found herself locked out. She went over to the neighbors and asked for the spare key her family left with them for emergencies. The neighbor walked her back to her house, presumably to tell the girl's parents she had been out at all hours, and when he unlocked the door, a bunch of smoke rolled out from the smoldering carpet. Neighbor calls 911, and the girl freaks out, says it was a mistake and that she didn't mean it. The neighbor is standing there with a WTF look on his face. Cops heard the call for fire, and they jumped on it to help. When they arrived, this girl was loosing her in the front yard. Neighbor relays what he heard to the cops. The girl's parents are now up and trying to figure out what was going on. Apparently, the girl told the cops she knocked over a lamp or something innocent, and then went for a walk. But when they looked inside the front door and saw the makings of a crime scene, coupled with her ever-changing and inconsistent story, they put some cuffs on her. Mom is pissed, and the girl says that she wishes she would have killed them. While I wasn't there for that moment, I imagine she shook her fist and said, and I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those meddling neighbors. Story 19, an EMS, not a fired or JK, they're cool. We had an absolute bag medic in my last job who was fired from 2 different fire departments. It's really hard to get fired from fire, but apparently setting your boat on fire to collect the insurance money so your soon-to-be ex can't demand it in your divorce. 2 separate times, with 2 different soon-to-be ex-wives, will do it. Story 20, not a firefighter, but I occasionally worked on fire investigation scenes. A few years ago, there was a major gas explosion. One home was leveled and caused extensive damage throughout the entire subdivision, the huge shockwave knocking other homes off their foundations. The closest neighboring homes got the worst of it, one of them also burning down and killing the residents trapped inside. It was a terrible scene. The house at the center of the explosion had luckily been unoccupied when it blew. The owner and her boyfriend were at a casino. Her young daughter was at a sleepover. The cat was being boarded for the weekend. That's unusual. I have cats. I know lots of cat owners, unless there are serious medical or behavior concerns. Nobody puts their cat up for a night out, kind of weird, but the evidence has to speak for itself. Surveying the house, lots of household items and furniture were still identifiable. It exploded more than it burned. I found several DVDs, but no DVD player or television in the living room area. Ditto for PlayStation games, but no console. No sofa either, chairs, but no kitchen table, plenty of random utensils from the kitchen, but not much in the way of dishes or silverware. I do find some clothes, but almost all of them are size for a very small girl. Much younger than the daughter, unless they were things she had outgrown years ago. Eventually, we obtained some fairly recent photos of the home from a real estate listing, where the owner briefly put it on the market. The photos confirmed that there were multiple large pieces of furniture present at one time that we weren't finding any trace of at the scene. Turns out the boyfriend had a history of insurance scams. He talked the owner into a scheme to blow up the house and collect the payout, and enlisted his brother and some friends to hold on to all of their nice possessions temporarily while they rigged the fireplace gas valve and thermostat to blow. The case took years to wrap up due to the huge amount of evidence collected, multiple defendants, and venue changes, but the boyfriend was convicted. There were lots of things that didn't initially add up to signal this was arson, but the universal "they boarded the cat" reaction caused Snowball the cat to become the unofficial case mascot. Story 21, police car in small-town USA was doused in an unidentified fluid and torched. We stopped it before it spread to the building police station it was parked next to. Story 22, in the city that I work for, the garbage trucks use the alleys for their routes. A guy walking down one of the alleys at 3 a.m. decided to start lighting stuff on fire that people had left out for the next morning's garbage pickup. My engine company was initially toned out for a couch on fire. After extinguishing that several blocks away, it was a pile of rubbish that was against a wooden fence. After finishing up with that, we start heading back to the firehouse and notice an orange glow and a smoke header about 5 or 10 blocks south of us. As my captain was getting ready to call in over the radio, dispatch wound up toning out the box assignment. We arrived first on scene to see the entire north side of this vacant house burning. House was sided with gasoline siding. No accelerants were needed. He literally put a lighter to some of the siding peeling off, and it took off like a match head. Burning asphalt siding spreads like it's soaked in gasoline, hence the name. Police investigating the incidents checked home surveillance cameras in the area and were able to follow him on several cameras down the alleys as he lit these fires. To explain it better, they would have him on camera walking down the alley, watch him light one, then would lose him from that camera as he ran away. Then another camera several houses down would pick him up as he kept traveling. Story 23, not a fireman, but we were working on a house that was near completion. Everything was done except for some cabinets and mirrors and some landscaping. A few of the crew were volunteer firefighters. I got a text late at night saying the house was up in flames. When I saw the house the next morning, everything was gone. It was burnt to the ground. The fire had burned so hot that the solid steel counterweight on the backhoe nearby started to melt and looked misshapen. It was then that I knew it was arson. The investigator said that without a ton of accelerant, there was no way it could have burned that hot. Apparently, they used a combination of diesel and gas, making the fire hotter than a normal diesel one. I forget exactly why they torched the place, but it wasn't insurance fraud. If I remember correctly, the soon-to-be residents had made some enemies where they used to live. New owners still got a house, and we still got paid. Story 24, I grew up in Rhode Island. Old textile mills regularly caught on fire. I live in Oregon now, and I am pretty sure that a local restaurant accidentally caught fire a few months ago. Story 25, not me, but there was a house down the street that was vacant. No one lived there, and the electricity was shut off to the house. It burned to the ground for no apparent reason, until it was revealed that the reason it was vacant was because the meth head that lived there had been evicted. Turns out it wasn't intentionally set ablaze, but she was just practicing her chemist skills, and it got out of hand. Story 26 showed up to a single wide trailer fire that had been abandoned for years, but was a frequent home to squatters. I was on initial attack on the hose with a new kid behind me. We advanced on the trailer with the intention to drown it when I noticed a plume of green flame. A number of things can cause green flame, but in this case all it did was highlight the 6 propane tanks fully engulfed in flame not 5 yards away from us. We had no idea how long they were engulfed, and even though they don't blow up as easy as they do in movies, they will explode after venting for too long. Needless to say, we backed the out of there and continued to drown it from a safe distance. Luckily, there was no explosion, but after it was all said and done, we discovered that the trailer was being used as a meth lab. However, we didn't realize that it was arson until the 4th or 5th meth lab burned down. Turns out there was a vigilante sousing out where all the meth labs were and torching them. I'm conflicted. On one hand, I don't miss a single meth lab, but on the other, these fires exposed my department to a concerning amount of toxins and carcinogens beyond the norm. My chief got a terrible rash from one that took a week to heal. No one knows who the vigilante is. There was a police officer arrested for arson, and after that the arsons have stopped for a couple years now. However, there were a couple firefighters that would always beat the rest of the scene, even though their station was further away than ours, and they got real cagey when we brought that up. Makes one wonder. Story 27, my dad's house burned down after he died. His ex-wife, who lived next door, texted me. It was a fire hazard and she needed a key to it. The fire marshal said it was arson and they totally think she did it, but there was no proof. Story 28, car fire. Fully engulfed, we put it out, and there was bones in the back seat. Oh, dude, someone's dog was back there. Firefighter pokes it. It's a body. Story 29, okay. So I'm not a firefighter, but this story comes from my friend's fraternity. Basically, sometime around 20 years ago, all of the brothers of the fraternity decided that they wanted a new house and all agreed to burn their current house down to collect the insurance money. Long story short, they actually end up burning it down, and after the firefighters put out the blaze, the fire marshal goes in to inspect the house. After a few minutes in the house, the marshal comes out and says to the brothers, so it looks like the walls were stuffed with newspaper. The brothers had decided to stuff the walls with newspaper and light it up, thinking that the newspaper would help burn the house down quicker. The fraternity is still dealing with the consequences to this day. Story 30, late to the party. But I will add a story. One of my instructors told me they had this guy Chuck that had been with the department for only about 6 months or so, but had developed a reputation for being overly excited about responding to a fire call. Chuck would also constantly complain if they had not had a call recently. About a month later, my instructor Terry gets a call very early one morning, and it is from Chuck, and he asks if there has been a call about a fire yet this morning. Terry replied no, and went back to bed. Less than 5 minutes later, Terry gets an alert about a house fire, and before he even gets a chance to answer the radio call, he hears Chuck tell dispatch that he is already on scene. Once the fire was out, Terry pulled Chuck aside to ask him about the fire, and Chuck said that he was driving around and saw the smoke. Well, something did not sit right with Terry, and he alerted the arson investigator. A week later, same thing happens, except it was a business that was on fire. Chuck called Terry, asked if there was a report of a fire. Terry said no, and as soon as he got off the phone, he got dressed and was heading out the door when he got the alert, and again, Chuck responded immediately that he was on scene. By the time that the first due engine arrived, Chuck already had the fire out. The one thing that Chuck overlooked, however, was that the business had security cameras. The cameras recorded Chuck setting the fire, driving away and circling around the block, pulling back into the lot, and grabbing his equipment to extinguish the fire. TLDR, new firefighter complains that there are not enough fires, decides to take that problem head on.